Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Trey Olds Radio Show. This is Trey Olds. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today, my special guest is comedy writer Mr. Rowby Goren. Thank you, and join us in a minute. Okay, my first question to you is, how did you get started being a comedy writer?
Whenever you're ready, we can do it.
How did you get started being a comedy writer?
Well, I was always a funny kid in school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always doing jokes and things like that. I was always a funny kid. But I was more interested in being on camera, not so much a writer. But at some point, when I was working, I decided I wanted to write.
Mm-hmm.
So there were different shows on TV. There was the situation comedies, and I would write scripts for them, like The Munsters. I even liked a show called My Mother the Car.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote people thought that was, I knew it was a satire. People were saying, what a stupid show, but it really was a satire. Because there was a lot of shows similar to that, and they just took it one more step by making it a car. They knew what they were doing. And then the show that I liked was Green Acres.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a spec script for Green Acres and sent it in. I actually got a call from the producers of the show. They liked my script. I wanted to met with them. I was about 18. And they said, CBS wanted them to do a new show. And if they got that show, they would need somebody to work on Green Acres. And so about a week later, they called me back and said, CBS decided not to buy that other show. And so they were staying on Green Acres, so that ended that. And they were both shows. So that was a close call. So I was really more interested in writing sitcoms. But then it comes out a show called Laughing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I turned it on, and I was just amazed by it. It was quite a show, and it was we did. So anyway, so one day I'm turning on the TV, and the show called Laughing comes on, and I was just blown away. It was really a unique show. I mean, from the very beginning, Lucy was their competitor, and then also a show called Adam 12. But they would actually make references to Lucy. Hey, Lucy, blah, 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 blah. Oh, Adam 12, now you're on. It was something that was not done in those days. You just didn't. Other networks didn't exist, so it was shocking. And just everything about it was so different. So although I was interested in sitcoms, I started writing jokes. So I was working at that point at civil service typist clerk in the courthouse downtown in the divorce course marriage counseling division. I was typing up things and meeting unhappy people with their marriages at the counter, setting up appointments, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I took the bus to work. The bus was about 30 minutes to get to downtown LA from where I lived. And I would have a yellow tablet. I just write anything I could think of that I thought was funny. And so I wrote it. So that was a half hour to work. I had a 15-minute break, and then a lunch, and then another 15-minute break in the afternoon, and a back. So I would just write any joke I could think of. I didn't censor myself. I didn't know what I was going to do with these jokes, but my idea was to get it to laughing somehow. So I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. So then finally, somebody suggested what I should do is pick out. I had a whole notebook full of jokes. I still have that notebook. Mm-hmm. And they said, pick the 10 best jokes that you think are the best and send them in, to laugh at. So I did. I didn't have any connections to the show, basically, and I just didn't, my family was not in show business. So I said to the jokes on a Monday. Tuesday morning, I'm working in the divorce court, marriage counseling department. I pick up the phone, and it's the producer of Laugh-In. And we had he asked if I would come in and meet with him. I said, sure, And I went in the next day and met with George Slaughter, who was the executive producer, and Dan Rowan, who was one of the stars of the show. Mm-hmm. He and his partner, Dick Martin. Mm-hmm. And so I met with them in George's office in Toluca Lake, across from Warner Brothers, near NBC. And I don't know, somehow they thought I'd be a good writer for the show. I mean, afterwards, years later, George Slaughter, he would tell the Rowby story, and he thought I was putting him on. I was very naive. When I told him I'd go to meet with him, for example, I said, well, the 81 bus arrived. He just thought I was putting him on. And everything I said, because I was so naive and so ignorant about show business, I didn't know they weren't supposed to take jokes unsolicited on 3x5 cards, not from a writer, a known writer. Every writer and a comedy writer in Hollywood wanted to be on Laugh-In. Here I was, this kid with no experience whatsoever, other than I had these 10 jokes that he liked, I guess. And something happened in that meeting where they figured this kid is whatever, and that started my comedy writing career. So it shows you, even then, when they were not supposed to be looking at unsolicited manuscripts, the lawyers would tell them, don't dare touch that stuff. Somehow it got to George. When I got on the job, the secretaries there were showing me drawers of letters that came from other writers. They just stuck them in the drawers and didn't even respond to them. But it just so happened that mine got to the right secretary. Her name was Donna Schulman. And she thought my 10 jokes were funny. She interrupted George's meeting with a screenwriter who was working on his motion picture called Norman Is That You? And she thought my 10 jokes were funny enough to interrupt the meeting. Can you imagine? So she hands the jokes to George. This is what I was told later. And they fall on the floor for some reason. And he thought that was funny. Like he was giving me credit for things that I had the fact that I was taking the bus to him, I was telling him the bus schedule. He just thought I was putting him on, and it was the funniest thing. He would tell the Rowby story when he would have interviews about the early days of Laugh-In and about if I was in the audience, George would be he would be honored throughout the years because of Laugh-In, and I would sometimes go to those events at the Directors Guild and places like that. Mm-hmm. And if I was in the audience, he'd tell the Rowby story, saying he was so young his mother had to take him to work. Well, it was almost like that. I mean, the money I got per week at the civil service, I forgot what it was. Maybe it was, a month, maybe $300 or $400 a month in those days, and it was okay. But on Laugh-In, I got that same amount per week. So I was able to buy my first car. I bought my first house. All of that from Laugh-In, of course, started my career on a show that was guaranteed to be renewed every year after year. I was on that show for, I think, four, maybe 5 seasons to the bitter end. And we always knew when we were finished for the year, the show would be renewed. So it was a great way to start a comedy writing career, because usually, if I would have taken the sitcom approach, maybe I would have written a few scripts a year if I was lucky or whatever. But with Laugh-In, it was a steady job, and it was kind of funny. It was a lot of writing had to be done, but we really only worked 5 days a week, 9 to 5. We never worked weekends, and somehow it all ended up working. And of course, we had a wonderful cast that made all the difference. And of course, George Slaughter, who was the producer, who would oversee the show from the script to the production. He had a special podium in Studio 4 at NBC in Burbank, and he would oversee the show. And although it was scripted, there was a lot of improvisation that went on. and a cast that really worked well on their feet. They certainly had a reading of the show every week, the script, but basically their first real rehearsals, although we did have a rehearsal studio, and some things were rehearsed, I'm sure, they really did most of it on their feet. The director of the show was pretty much a traffic controller, just making sure all the stuff was being done. They really relied on the cast that was so unique and so wonderful that they're the ones that took our scripts, whatever, and brought it up to the level where Laugh-In was such a huge success. And then from there, I wrote other shows, of course.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of writers. So variety shows went on for maybe a few years, but they died after a while because a lot of them were pretty miserable, and very few were any really good, like Carol Burnett was, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the other shows were, well, they just weren't up to the level of Carol Burnett. They were, I remember I got a job writing on Tony Orlando, and he was very honest with us writers. He says, look, guys, I know I'm not a comedian, but I'll do my very best. Don't give me your best stuff, and I'll try my best. So you got to give him credit. At least but then there were all these other crazy shows. Anybody that had a hit record, they'd give them a variety show, and that pretty much killed variety. But I wrote game shows. I did finally write situation comedies. I like those maybe the best, but of course Laugh-In was always my high spot. Nothing could beat Laugh-In of all the shows I did. But interestingly, at one point I got a phone call from my agent, and they said, Fat Albert was looking for writers. Can you write a Fat Albert cartoon? I said, well, no. I said, first of all, I've never written a cartoon before, and I don't know how you write those. And I certainly can't write the kind of dialect they had on Fat Albert. It was like a pseudo black dialect. I don't know. Wasn't nobody talked that way in real life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to do that. I said, well, go on and meet with them anyway. So I met with the head writer at I guess he was the producer, I guess, of the guy who was in charge of the writers. Filmation for Fat Albert, and he said, well, at least write one script. So I did, and they liked it, and they hired me to write, and finally 13 more. I wrote the most Fat Albert scripts of any one writer for that particular season, which was the last final season of Fat Albert. So I became a cartoon writer, and of course, these days, most people never heard of Laugh-In, but when I go around and meet people, if I say, hey, I wrote Fat Albert, He-Man, Tiny Toons, Ninja Turtles, that's what gets people excited, not my older material. Laugh-In was 50 years ago. And even Fat Albert, that's the most real young kids, they never heard of Fat Albert or He-Man. They might have heard of He-Man. There's going to be a new He-Man movie out, and Ninja Turtles, I think, remains popular. But I wrote a lot of cartoons nobody remembers, but still, I'll run into someone that says, I saw one of your Arthur the Aardvark, which is more of an arcane name, although he's still around, apparently. So my cartoons are what people get excited about because they were kids watching those cartoons. But it shows you, though, in the case of Laugh-In, that even without any credits or any connections, real connections, I was able to get on to the biggest comedy show on television in those days, just because I was ready for it. I wrote all those jokes, maybe a few hundred of them, and I picked the 10 best, and just things worked out. So anybody can break in if they're ready, especially now with the internet, that you can make your own movies now and have independent productions. So there's no excuses anymore. In those days, there were 3 networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. There was home box office. I'm not sure whether there was Showtime, but basically that was it.